be a dead mic. No, okay. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Your active participation is an essential part of school operations. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll preface my opening remarks with a few operational details. During this public hearing, I will invite a member of the board to speak to each article on the proposed warrant. Once a particular warrant has been read with additional information provided by the representative board member, the floor will be open for public feedback. The main purpose of a public hearing is for the board to hear public feedback on the proposed budget and warrant. We will attempt to provide clarifications. This session is not intended to be a back and forth discussion. If you have questions that are not answered to your satisfaction, please contact your board member, myself, or the SAU office. As always, we hope to maintain respect and decorum in our discussion. The warrant. This year's warrant is organized in the following manner. Article 1 deals with choosing a moderator for the 2025 annual meeting. Article 2 is why the polls will be open on Friday, March 8th from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. for school board elections. Article 3 deals with the operating budget. Tracy Bricky, the chair of the MVSD Finance Committee, will provide an overview of the proposed budget. Article 4 is the MVAA Administrators Collectively Bargained Agreement. Sally Hirsch Dickinson, chair of the MVSD Negotiations Committee, will speak to this proposed agreement. Article 5 provides for a special meeting should Article 4 be defeated. Article 6 is a request to add money to the Maintenance Expendable Trust. Article 7 includes boilerplate language that allows for other business to be addressed at the annual meeting. The first article dealing with any requested appropriation is Article 3, and I invite Tracy Bricky to present this article.
So, Article 3 states, to see if the school district, will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $48,298,106 for the support of schools, the salaries of school district officials and agents, and for the payment of statutory obligations of said district. This article does not include appropriations voted in other warrant articles. The school board recommends this article. So, in an effort to more succinctly and effectively review the proposed budget, we've listened to constituent feedback. Rather than addressing every single line item in the budget tonight, we will be discussing only the major budget influences and looking at projected expenses and changes from this year's budget by reviewing each function and providing relevant context. There will be time for questions at the end of this presentation. So, the overall increase to the proposed operating budget is $2,960,282, which represents a 5.91% increase. Some of the main drivers to the overall net increases will give you additional perspective to consider. Projected special education expenses are increasing by $1,432,276. If you compare this projected net increase to the overall net increase, special education expenses are 53.1% of the overall increase. The guaranteed maximum rate, GMR, which was provided to us by our provider, increase provided from our public risk benefits provider for health and dental coverage was 21.8%, or $770,933, which represents 28.6% of the total increase. The net increase of previously approved collective bargaining agreements of $362,519 represents 13.1% of the total increase. The percent increase of the operating budget compared to last year's total approved budget is 5.91%. Those three areas that I just mentioned account for 95.1% of the overall increase. The major areas of net decrease that helped offset some of that, health and dental benefit decreased on longitudinal data, totaling $159,949. The movement of the Director of Student Services and Administrative Assistant to the SAU level positions resulted in a decrease of $104,029. Without the reductions noticed, as well as a few smaller decreases, the percent of increase would have been 6.49%. The board and administration are consistently evaluating and monitoring longitudinal expenses. This practice resulted in the board and administration being able to decrease these functions by a total of $264,007. So, you all have the budget in front of you, and I'm going to talk about the areas of change resulting in the net increase. So function 1100, the regular education, on pages 1 through 4, it has an overall increase of $549,740, and that is primarily due to the health and dental increases, as well as separation pay for retiring teachers. Function 1210, special education, which is on pages 4 through 6, with a total on page 6. The function has an increase of $799,345. We see a significant increase to the tuition lines and the health and dental increases. These increases are based on changing student needs and are based on what we know about the student population at this time. Function 1211, the extended school year, special education, is on page 6. This function has an increase of $14,892, which is due to the increase in tuition costs. Function 1290, other special programs, is on page 7. The increase of $27,092, is due to the guaranteed maximum rate to the health and dental. Function 1420, the athletic programs, which is on page 8. Overall, this function is increasing $82,375. This increase is due to the following factors: the GMR for health and dental, the moving of the athletic trainer from a contracted position to an employee, dues increase, and the cost of coaching and referee fees. Function 2110, the school resource officer, on page 8. The increase of $15,978 is due to an increase in salary and benefits for the two school resource officers. That was a tongue twister. All right, function 2120, school counseling services, on pages 8 and 9. There's an increase of $51,590 due to the movement of the system of care position from a primarily grant-funded to district-funded, as well as the health and dental increases. Function 2140, special education services, psychologists, on page 10. an increase of $20,996. An increase in this line is due to the increasing costs of contracted services, as well as health and dental increases. Function 2149, Special Education Services Behavioral, on pages 10 and 11. The function sees an increase of $139,561. The increase in this line is due to the increases cost of contracting services, as well as, take a guess, health and dental. Okay. Function 2150, Special Education Services Speech, on page 11. That increase is $48,432. Again, due to the increasing costs of contracted services and health and dental. Function 2153, Special Education Services Hearing and Vision, page 11. That increase is $30,429. Again, increased costs for contracted services based on our current needs. Did I forget something? Oh, okay. I'm going to stop reading the page numbers because it seems they're incorrect.
Well, that's on the, if they have the full budget.
Oh, okay.
That's what
Sorry, all you have is page totals. All right, function 2162, Special Education Services, Physical Therapy. The function is an increase of $16,400 due to the increasing costs of contracted services based on what our current needs are. Function 2163, Special Education Services, Occupational Therapy. The function here has an increase of $50,389 due to the increasing costs of contracted services, as well as health and dental increases. Function 2225, Technology Services. The increase is $32,800. Primarily, these are due to licensing fees, as well as the health and dental increases. Excuse me, 1 minute. Function 2311, School Board Services. That increase is $1,310. That is due to liability insurance premium increase. Function 2313, Treasurer Services. The increase is $1,200, and that increase is due to fraud protection bank fees. 2321, the SAU assessment. The increase there is $290,526. This is the SAU budget apportioned out to the 2 districts within SAU 46. This increase is due to updated proration and preparing for separations. The SAU has seen 3 long-term employees retire in the last few years. There are also several current employees that would be eligible for separation pay if they decide to retire at any point. This budget helps to build the foundation to prepare for that. Additionally, the movement of the Director of Student Services and an administrative assistant to the SAU level position contributes to the increase. However, you will see a corresponding decrease in 2190. Function 2410, Office of the Principals. That increase is $43,037. That's health and dental, copier contracts, and a dues increase. 2620, Operations and Maintenance. This function has an overall increase of $88,315. The increase is due to health and dental rates, as well as an increase to the repair and maintenance line. 2720, Transportation. The increase there is $23,433 due to the health and dental. Function 2721, Transportation Regular Ed, $529 increase, and it's due to increased costs of vehicle insurance as well as, anyone? Thank you, Lee, health and dental. 27-22 transportation special education. The increase there is $192,168 due to the rising cost and increased need of out-of-district transportation as well as health and dental. 2,900, that 2,900 function is where the previously approved and collectively bargained agreements are budgeted. That increase was, or is, $316,695. And function 4,200, 4,200 and 4,600. 4,200 is site improvement, 4,600 building improvement. The increases there are $25,000 and $50,000 respectively, and they're based on longitudinal and expected expenses. There are some areas where we have net decreases. 1260, the ELL programs. 1410, co-curricular. 2210, the mentor program. 2212, curriculum development. 2723, transportation to the CTE. And 2725, transportation to field trips. Those small decreases there are due to workers' compensation rate reduction. 2130, the school nurse services, is seeing a $50,038 decrease, and that's due to longitudinal health and dental usage. Function 2190, other support, we see a $104,029 decrease. That's due to moving the director of services and the director of student services and the admin assistant positions to the SAU budget. Function 2222, library services. The decrease there is $87,269, and it's based on longitudinal data for health and dental. Function 2319, the other school board services. There's a decrease there of $22,642, which is also based on longitudinal data for health and dental usage. There is some good news for revenues. This year we see an increase of $1,247,614 to our adequacy funding due to a change in the legislation. We anticipate a reduction in the local sources other than taxes of $126,880 and $13,950 less in the unassigned fund balance. We estimate the net overall increase to be an increase of $1,589,120. As always, the district administrators and officials continue to advocate for revenues when legislation is brought forward at the State House. Please let your voices be heard by your representatives in Concord as well. This isn't in my notes, but I would also encourage you to let your federal representatives know that it would really be nice if they would fund special education to what they said they were going to fund special education to. So, I'm now going to respectfully open the floor to comments so that the board can hear from the public. Anyone? Lee?
The trainer has been a contracted service, and we've saw the need for the hours, and by having her on staff, it's actually, in the long run, going to end up saving us money by moving her to a position in the school instead of it being contracted, where really it's one of those things where her rate is controlled by the market, and so that was one of the main drivers. Also, the number of hours contracted for, realizing the need for more of those, it made fiscal sense to make her part, and she was willing to become part of MB.
And super.
What's that?
She'll be working in classes with students.
Right.
She's going to work in classes with students also, Lee. Yep.
Is there any, I'm a huge proponent of special education. Went through it, and I truly believe they can either pay for it now or you can pay for it later. So if we can really build up the special education services and offer these kids what they need to get them to get educated and have some kind of usable skills regardless that factor in with what their capabilities are and help them maximize that, I think is important. But I'm wondering, this is probably the third or fourth year where special ed has really stood out as an increase. Is there any kind of strategic plan to look at this overall? Because I keep hearing about contracted services. And I know, I mean, my kids both had teachers who were visually impaired that were contracted out. And I'm wondering, you know, when does it make sense to bring those services internally to the district? We pick up, you know, one or two for, depending on what the needs are. Is there any kind of strategic plan to look at that? I know it's not predictable. You can't count on, you know, how many kids are going to be diagnosed and so forth. But there is some data that sort of shows where this goes.
Lee, I'm just going to have you swap out the mic. And can you just, for all of there's about 7,000 people viewing at home. If you could just repeat, you know, just that, the main gist of your question about special ed and looking at programming.
Okay. So the question is, okay.
Whoa.
Stand back here. The question is related to special ed. This is probably, I'm going to say the second or third year that I've really seen skyrocketing stuff. And every time Tracy went through, it was pretty consistent. She was talking about contracted services. I'm not even going to get into health and dental. But the contracted services, you know, when do we start, you know, we've brought the trainer in full time. When do we start as a district looking at bringing in some of these specialists full time? Hearing, PT, you know, blind and visually impaired. With that said, with the caveat that these people are very hard to get. I know there's a shortage throughout the country. But the gist of my question is there a strategic plan to look at this and see where the balance is?
That's definitely something that's been on our radar, and you hit the nail right on the head when you said, you know, the difficulty in hiring those folks. We've done that with OTs in the past, and if we can hire them, we've made some steps. Mary Paradise has been all over it, like trying to say, all right, if we could hire someone, we can reduce our reliance on, you know, this service or that service. So when we've had the opportunity to do that, we've looked at the numbers and we have made those moves. The trouble is finding the people that we can get in, because certainly, you know, the contracted services, as you pointed out, it gets to a point pretty quickly that where we'd be better off having them as employees. But that's certainly something we never know from year to year what type of needs we're going to get in. But trying to project, obviously if we have someone in younger grades, we assume they're going to be with us. That's when we start looking and planning for some of those positions.
Okay. I would encourage any kind of strategic planning we can do for that, because you're right, it will take a while to find somebody, but we can find people and we can keep them here. The health and dental costs, are they actual or are they projected?
I guess I can jump in, or Kathleen will answer.
So they're projected, it's like,
That's okay, I'll just repeat what she said. She said they're projected. Oh, fantastic.
guaranteed maximum rate increase. To be honest, I expect that that will be the rate. I don't see them coming back and saying it's less.
You don't see them coming back and saying it's less. Okay.
Other districts were capped at 25%. So, you know, I'm certainly not going to say we were lucky to only be at 21.8, but districts were capped at 25, which means they were going to be over which means they need that money from the folks. So that guaranteed maximum rate, the GMR that Kathleen was talking about, to her point, that's probably what we'll be seeing.
All right, last question. In the past, we have seen this level of increase, and then there's been some prediction, or as we've come back around to the end of the year, it has been offset to some extent by the fund balance. Can we maybe anticipate that this year, or is this it? Is this hard and fast?
We always hope to have a fund balance. In fact, the last couple of years, our fund balance is lower than than what it's supposed to be. The municipal rule of thumb is like 3 to 5%, and we're below that. So we are looking at ways to, freeze things if there are anything that we can control as we get to the later part of the year to try to up that number, because not only should we have that safety net, but also to then offset taxes for that following year.
Okay, thank you all.
Good evening. My name is Tom Liberty, and I live at 292 Cornhill Road. What was the fund balance last year?
Hold, please.
Yep. No problem. I am. $500,000. Okay. Do we have capital reserves for special education?
We do have a special ed fund, and currently we have $504,615 and
Sorry,
56 cents.
504?
504,000, yep.
Okay. Do we expect all the staff, is the plan to have everybody come back next year? All the teachers, support staff, everybody? No reduction in forces or anything?
No.
Okay. Just two more questions, and I got a statement. The 2900 line, which is about the negotiated contract. I just need a little help to understand this. So that went up, I think 360 something. Yeah, 316. So just what does that entail? Because when you look at this, also the wages, salaries went up, and the health went up. So I'm just curious, what does that line entail? Is that FICA, NHRA, the retirement system?
So that is, yes, it's salary increases, retirement, health and dental, anything related to the increased cost with the CBA.
Okay, so, and I'm sorry, I just don't understand, but when I see, like benefits, if I look under regular ed, I see a difference of $424,000 in benefits. Where's the separation between the 1100 edition and the 2900? I just don't understand.
So most of the health and dental would be in the 1100 or in the 1200 or whatever function it is. When we hire new people, we have money in the 2900s that was collectively bargained. We can move money from that line to cover any additional expenses in the salaries and benefits.
Okay. Do you know what the tax impact of this proposed budget is on the towns?
We don't have the guess on that, because there's so many things that you're estimating to throw into that tax rate. So we really don't have a firm number by town.
Okay. So I'm just gonna make a a statement, and I appreciate everybody's work and your due diligence, but just here's my concern. So I've been attending all the Bosquen town meetings and so forth. And so the last tax bill in Bosquen was $19.43 per thousand. The school was $10.28, so the school district, or 53%. So the town is proposing a 1.4% increase in their budget, and there's also some warrants in there. But the tax impact right now is $1.03, and for a $300,000 home, that's over $300. And our budget is, like, with all the warrants and everything, is $6 million. This is getting close to $50 million. I'm just concerned about the cost and the burden it's going to put on taxpayers. It's a lot of money during tough times. So that's why I asked about the staffing. Is there, I'm not looking to riff anybody, I don't want to take anybody's jobs away, but is there attrition? People leaving that positions don't have to be filled. And could we use capital reserve money, some of that special ed money, to offset that $650,000 that is being increased in special education? So it just seems, I'm coming to the game late. I didn't go to any of your meetings, so I apologize. I'm trying to catch up late, but it just seems, I'm just worried about the hit that people are going to take between their towns. And, you know, as I said, you're 53% of Bosquen taxes. I don't know where you are in the other districts, but it's a good chunk of change, and I'm just worried for my community.
Hello, Dave Hemingway, Webster, also chair of the select board there. I have a few different questions, but I'll jump ahead to one of the topics that's been coming up, which is special education, to ask a couple specific questions here. Regarding the tuition and travel portion of special education, which has gone up significantly, is this primarily increases in pricing or primarily increases in amount of required use or specific large types of special ed that is needed for a specific student that's new?
Good evening. I'm Mary Paradise, Special Ed Director. It's a combination of both. So we have increased number of students accessing, as well as increases in the actual tuitions, as well as contracted services. And just to clarify a little bit, the contracted services do reflect what the cost is for those out-of-district placements. We are pretty well covered with our own employees for the district need. But when we have students placed in a variety of communities, it is more effective to hire the people that are at that site, and their cost is huge. The cost for those contracted services, there's a couple programs where it's almost $200 an hour for somebody to do speech with a child. In our district, it's a lot less than that because there are employees. And because they're spread out and the numbers aren't large enough, it's not cost effective to hire someone to go out to do that. But it's a combination. We've seen an increase, and we've seen an increase in students moving in who come in with that placement already.
And one follow-up to that, since you mentioned that the line covers a whole bunch of different categories, roughly how much of that, and maybe this is okay to ask or not, and roughly how many students require the travel and tuition portion of special ed, and what percent of the student population is that?
Currently, and we use the October 1st count because it fluctuates even from October to now. So the percent, we have currently 20 students at that October 1st count that are in that out of district. And I think if I remember right, it was like two, it's hard to see on that. The out-of-district percent of the whole budget was roughly .03.
Okay, thank you. I do have other comments and questions, but in case anyone else has special ed, I'll take a seat for a moment.
Bill Hines, Bosquen. Tracy, is there an online document that you were following? I guess they had more stuff, and that's why the numbers were off. So there are more details in there, I take it? So the printout. that we
Yeah,
have.
the page numbers was the full, I know that some folks brought the full budget that we've had online for the last few weeks. So that was the pages that Tracy was referencing. That has the line by line, but since a lot of the lines were static and didn't see an increase or a decrease, in the packet is any function total that had an increase or decrease.
Thank you. At the end, the 4,200 and the 42 or 4,600, the site improvement and then the building improvement increases there. Are there any people in those lines, or and what are the two increases at 25 and 50? I should know this because I know Fred gave a speech on it, but it's not clear to me.
Yeah, it's not people, it's just increasing costs. Those lines have been static for a number of years, and the costs have gotten to the point that we needed to bump those up, because anything that we're doing if you're doing a home improvement, you see the cost increase, and Fred felt that it was time to bump those up a bit.
Thank you. I remember. I do recall that now. So it's just increases in the materials and stuff that we need to upgrade. So it's no specific projects. Got it.
Correct.
And then I turn to the revenue page. Can you slice out the 1,231,120 number for the tuition line? I know Andover is some of it, and then there's other tuition, and I think that might be with the Learning Center stuff, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers for that breakdown, because those are estimates based on the numbers, but the large majority of it is Andover tuition. And we do anticipate to have at least one or two or potentially more students at the Learning Center, depending on our space. Got it.
So now I'm going to turn to one last item, and that is what we're charging or budgeting to charge Andover for the ensuing year. I've spoken at a couple of meetings, and I'm befuddled by how we can't use the number that we said we were going to use. We should be using a 10% discount off from the state high school costs for Merrimack Valley last year. And to my knowledge, based on what I've seen, we're not using that number. We're using a number that is a draft of the DOE 25. Are we going to correct that and charge what we said we were going to charge?
The contract states that it's the cost per pupil is how that's calculated. When we submit the DOE 25, we have a line that is the cost per pupil. When the state looks at it, they don't have their own DOE 25. They make an adjustment to ours based on attendance at Concord Regional Technical Center, the Winnisquam Ag Center. That's not something that we can calculate. But when they do that, they do not touch the cost per pupil line. They put an additional line in and say the adjusted cost per pupil. The tuition agreement clearly states that it's the cost per pupil from the DOE 25. And therefore, the number that we submit on the DOE 25 is the number that we'll be using.
Randy, that's a semantic that I disagree with. And let me just point out something. Mr. Hemingway asked last year when the proposal was in front of the voters what the cost would be. And the number that Mark pulled up and used was the state adjusted DOE 25. That's the number. There is only one New Hampshire DOE 25, and that belongs to the state. And I would further point out to you that the reason the state adjusts it is because they take out some of the costs for our tuition to CRTC, and they need to adjust the student count, so we're looking at apples to apples, not apples to oranges.
And the tuition agreement clearly states cost per pupil from the DOE 25 and not the adjusted cost per pupil.
Then
I'm sorry,
why
Bill,
did- then
I
why
said that
did
I would
Mark-
implement that tuition agreement as it was stated, and that is how it's stated.
Then why did Mark pull up the number that was the state adjusted DOE 25? Look, Randy, it's another $753 less per student before we apply the 10% discount, and then what's really a 14.5 discount because we're using last year's number. It really is, in my mind, very disrespectful to the taxpayers, and especially coming off a 15-year agreement that you didn't charge even close. I learned last year that, we, at a recent meeting after we've been discussing this on and on, that we were stuck at 14,000. We decided that, yep, maybe we could go up. So we were going to go up to 14,750. The right to know request that I did a little while ago suggests we're charging 15,000. Okay, that's good. I'm happy that we could go up. Why not go up and charge the real number, the number that the agreement says we should charge? I am just flabbergasted by this. It's for the 8 years that I've done the math, because I don't have numbers from before, we're up to $1,750,000 that we haven't collected on behalf of the taxpayers of the district, and it's very disrespectful. And we could fix it. I explained to you that there is a part of the agreement that calls for a reconciliation. You could apply that, and you haven't done it. Like I said, that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, since I don't see anyone else standing up, I'll come back. Regarding the 2,700 transportation stat, which things are contracted services versus those that are in-house in other line items? Because I see most everything that I would expect to see as an individual line item, except for perhaps drivers. 2,700 transportation. I'm just trying to understand what's actually.
In the transportation services, the contracted services reflect when we have to contract with an outside agency to bring those students to out of district, as well as the McKinney-Vento cost, which is for homeless transportation. Oftentimes, the need to go further away from us. At the same time, our buses are running in-house, doesn't allow transportation of MV to pick those kids up. But we work with Chris and the SAU to try to make sure if we can somehow balance where, we do use our transportation for closer places, such as Spalding Academy, which is just up in Northfield. But when we're headed towards the coast or other areas, it interferes too much. So that's where we're getting a contracted cost. I actually can give you just a quick comparison. So transportation to one of our out-of-district places that we're contracting with in a particular case was $78,690. Transportation for our people to do it, the cost came in at $15,000. So it truly is, unfortunately, people taking advantage of a very small market where we have nowhere else to go. And I have transportation that costs more than tuitions in some instances. It's private business, so our state has chosen not to interfere with that because it's private.
One other comment, which probably Randy will have to take care of, or assign somebody to talk about. According to the school system, our town was overcharged last year. This is being rectified, but how did this mistake happen? What caused it? And what is being changed in the process to prevent this from happening again to either us or another town? And I'll sit down as I take this.
I don't know the specifics of that, so I will have to follow up with you on that.
All right, I can go without it. I'll use my teacher voice.
Well, the people at home, if you don't, could you come down here?
I sure can. Thank you. Forgot about people at home. So actually, I just wanted to stand up to sort of talk to Bill's question for a second. You know, this has been going on for 15 years, that this has been a passion for Bill. And I know, Laura, you were a part of it. Tracy, you probably were here for a portion of it. But the rest of you might not have some of that history, right? Bill was frustrated 15 plus years ago about the Andover tuition thing. He came in front of annual meeting and he advocated so strongly for Merrimack Valley taxpayers and what would be the right thing to do and the right dollar amount to achieve fairness. That's all he ever was asking for, was fairness. That what I pay and what you pay is what students coming from Andover should pay. And an agreement was hammered out in the spirit of that. And then we find out it never really was properly enacted. And I feel like Bill is advocating strongly again about fairness. And there's a coldness to the way this is being approached by the board and by the district. And I don't get it. I don't get it. When he's asking about the DOE 25 and he's asking about achieving equity and fairness, there should be a little bit more compassion, a little bit more responsiveness to that. We're accepting students from Andover, and I was the principal of this school for 10 years, and those were my kids. They became part of the valley. But it was always done assuming there was a fairness when it comes down to the business transaction of it, right? What we pay in the valley is what the students coming from Andover should also be paying as part of that tuition. And I watched this unfold on the floor of annual meeting last year, and I thought it was cold and dismissive. And I've watched emails go on this year, and they too are cold and dismissive. And that's not right. You might think he's annoying you. He's right. He's asking for fairness and equity. And I'm just appealing to you to please be more forthright in the way this gets approached. It is for lack of a better term, we're educating all the kids. They're all our kids. But paying fair share is important too. And I'm giving you my perspective. I thought we had solved it 15 years ago. I thought Bill was right then. Thought it got resolved and we find out otherwise. And I just don't like the feel of the way this is playing out. And I think, to Dave's point,
if there's another financial mistake that's been made, that's inequitable to one of the towns, we need to get that fixed. And again, better answers than, I don't know, we'll have to get back to you. You're trusted with the taxpayer dollars here, right? And I need, I guess, more assurance about the way that plays out. And that's why I wanted to come down and just say to you. And I'm hoping that, you know, we can continue to move the district forward, become a better valley. My kids are here. We all want to see that happen. But I'm just looking for a little bit more transparency, understanding, compassion in the way this gets answered, and not a sense of we're bothering people when questions like that get asked. That's my perspective on it, and thank you for listening.
Is there anyone else who wants to comment on the proposed budget? In that case, I will invite Sally Hurst Dickinson to present Article 4.
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us this evening, whether in person or online. Article 4 reads as follows: to see if the school district will approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Merrimack Valley School Board and the Merrimack Valley Administrators Association, which calls for the following estimated increases in salaries and benefits. For the academic year 2024-2025, $0. 2025 to 2026, $40,377. 2026 to 2027, $44,180. The school board recommends this article. The Merrimack Valley School Board and the Merrimack Valley Administrators Association have collaborated to bring forward a collectively bargained agreement, or CBA, to MV voters. I'm going to offer an overview of some of the high points of the MVAA 2024 to 2027 contract. The MVSD and all schools exist in an increasingly competitive and changing marketplace for education professionals. Principals set the tone for the school culture, promoting values such as inclusivity, respect, and academic integrity. By supporting teachers and staff, they enhance the quality of education and address the diverse needs of students. Their leadership and vision are crucial in shaping the educational experiences and outcomes for students, making them instrumental in the development of future generations. In order to attract and retain high-quality administrators, we need to be competitive with the current marketplace. We're hopeful that, along with the great working environment in our schools and supportive communities, this agreement will indeed allow the district to attract and retain talented, innovative, and caring administrators. Some details about the CBA. This is a 3-year agreement. The new salary schedule has been realigned to clearly reflect the experience and educational attainment of all professional staff. In the first year, there will be an increase of up to 5.01%, followed by 2.39% in the second year and 2.57% in the third year. Due to the transition of the Director of Student Services to an SAU level position, the first year of the CBA reflects no additional money to be raised. The resulting warrant article will read 2024 to 2025, $0. 2025 to 2026, $40,377. 2026 to 2027, $44,180. I now open the floor to feedback on Article 4. Thank you.
Mike Jetty Webster, it's working now, that's good. I want to make sure I understand it. Do you have a copy of the TA for this agreement? Tentative agreement?
Currently, the full board has not seen a copy of it, so it is still a draft and not up for a right-to-know request. After it's voted on in March, it'll be a public document, and that will be put forward.
So Randy, that answer confuses me because the law states that the board has to ratify in public session the tentative agreement no later than January 9th. So you're saying the full board hasn't seen the tentative agreement?
No, they went on the recommendation of the committee.
So they ratified an agreement that they didn't read
That's correct.
in public session?
That's correct.
Never heard of that, but that's okay. So let me just ask, because if I heard the explanation from Sally correctly, it's that the Director of Special Services has been removed from that CBA.
That's correct.
That salary of about $100,000 has been shifted over to the SAU side out of the MVAA.
Correct.
And that has freed up $100,000 to use to pay salary increases for everybody.
Right, so some of it will become part of the SAU assessment that gets doled out to both Andover and Merrimack Valley. So the decrease isn't the full amount, but yeah.
So when we say that it's a zero tax impact here,
The negative balance that's part of that is figured into the actual budget on the other side of things. So the zero, even if it may, end up being negative 60,000, which would have been, that appears at other places in the budget and not necessarily in that line.
okay, but a little bit of a shell game to follow, to be honest. It's like, so you've taken something and moved it from here to there, but then you're saying that there's no tax impact. So let me explain where I'm coming from on this. I agree with Sally. We need to attract and retain the best. And I'm looking at zero saying, that's not gonna do it. But it's really not zero. It's really, there is money freed up from the move that is able to compensate people. If I'm hearing it correctly, Randy.
Correct, and it was discussed, Tracy pointed that out, about there was an increase in one spot but a decrease in the other. So the increase was the SAU assessment, the decrease was from that line that was in the budget. So it's not quite the same because Andover, with their, ends up paying about 13% of that. So the overall savings for that position is the 13% that gets sent to Andover in the district apportionment.
But you have money to compensate administrators. So individual administrators next year, even though I'm looking at a zero on the paper, individual administrators will be receiving an increase. Can you comment on what percent that increase is?
Yeah, Sally pointed out that in the first year, it's up to 5.01%, second year, 2.39, and then the third year, 2.57.
Okay. And I mean, 5% in this market is still on the low side, I think. So, but again, when I'm reading zero, it's hard to understand that that means people are getting compensated, right? So, and I'm still taken aback by not having a TA. I've not heard of that. I mean, it goes against practice that I'm aware of in Merrimack Valley. The associations typically ratify an agreement, and then it goes to the board, and the board ratifies the agreement, and it is a public document when that happens. It's done in public. So to vote on something that you didn't see is mind-boggling. I get that you empower your committee to bargain that agreement, and you give parameters that you ask them to stick within, and when they come back with something, as long as they've stuck within those parameters, you have to support that. That's all makes sense. But you still have to see the written word, and it's easy to say, to look at just salary adjustments. There are other economic benefits that have costs in language that, again, without seeing the full TA, it's hard to know exactly, have we disclosed it all and calculated it all? And the board doesn't even know that because you haven't seen it. And that's just, frankly, shocking. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bill Hines again. Just a couple of quick questions on this. Who were the negotiators?
It was the members of the Negotiations and Contracts Committee.
For the MVEA? And then, well, who, Sally, I assume you?
Yes.
And other members of the board, who are the members of the negotiating committee?
All right, so it would be me. Yep.
5 of you, perfect, thank you. And then the MVEA, was there a lead person for them?
The MVAA.
Sorry.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep, it was,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Sam,
over there.
Sam York was the lead negotiator,
Yeah.
and then it was Jen Moore and Jeff Druin.
Perfect, thank you. How many administrators are there in the contract? Obviously, there's one less that we moved to the SAU.
Yeah, so
that we-
17.
Perfect, thank you.
Anyone else wish to comment on the proposed Article 4? In that case, Jessica Wheeler Russell is Chair of the Facilities Committee, and I will invite her to present Article 6.
Good evening. Oh, yep, good evening. Article 6 reads, to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 to be deposited in the Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund for the purposes of maintaining school buildings and grounds with said functions from June 30th, 2024, unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1st. No additional amount to be raised from taxation. And the school board recommends this article. So a little bit of history on Article 6. In 1993, MVSD voters approved the establishment and funding of a Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund, or MET. The express purpose of this fund is repairing and maintaining the district's school buildings and grounds. The district has worked hard to craft a proactive capital improvement plan, also known as a CIP. The CIP is a valuable communication and planning tool that helps the district protect the investment represented by our buildings and grounds, an insured value of over $90 million. Feedback from the community indicates that rather than bringing larger capital expenses or projects to the voters through separate articles on the warrant, the district should save in anticipation of these future expenses. With that in mind, we're asking to reserve the $150,000 from the end-of-year unassigned fund balance to be placed in the district Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund. This money will be utilized to support the MVSD's capital improvement plan as we prepare to address expected infrastructure and building needs throughout the district. A couple of other additional points here. Money can only be added to the MET fund through voter approval at annual meeting. The money can be withdrawn from this fund only after a public hearing, and at that public hearing, the board will provide information as to why the money from the fund is being withdrawn. For example, to replace a roof at one of the schools. The board will listen to feedback from the attendees, and then at a board meeting, the board will vote to take action. Some of the projects indicated in the CIP have the potential of offsetting expenses via competitive grants and/or some federal funding. For example, many security-related projects are often grant eligible. A Maintenance Expendable Trust Fund provides the district the flexibility to respond to these grant opportunities, whereas a capital reserve fund does not. Thank you, and I now open the floor to feedback on Article 6.
Yeah, Tom Liberty Boston again. How much is in that capital reserve right now?
$1,166,657.
It's 1 point what, I'm sorry?
1.166.
Okay. And what is targeted in the CIP that we're going to use the money for?
So
Over the
in-
next 3 or 4 years?
So even just looking at 24, 25, there's about $1.2 million. One of the, a couple of the main ones, one of the big ticket items is a roof at Pennacook Elementary and the track. Those two combined are pretty close to $1 million. So those are some of the things that are targeted as far as the big ticket items.
Deal with this.
There's a total of 982,000 in the second year. Now, again, these are all things that are just sort of put on that plan, and it would be nice, if, as you probably heard some of the discussions about the Bosquen roof, we were able to put that off because when we had the inspection, we were able to put it off. So we, even though we had planned for that 5 years ago, we ended up not doing that until last year. So some of these may do that same thing. I could take a look at some of those bigger possibilities in that second year. Just give me one moment. Yeah, that's 1.2 million of the things that are currently on the CIP. And again, the 1 point. It needs a total replacement that will cost close to $500,000. We've been doing some patchwork over the last couple of years, replacing one part. We had some tree roots growing underneath on the backside, and that buckled up, and we were able to patch it and do a couple of things, but it's getting to the point now that I see some nods, that it's time. So, sure.
Here you go, Lee.
Yes, please.
Does anybody remember what we put into the MET last year?
Yeah, we took a year off last year. The year before, we put 300,000.
Yeah, I know. And I raised the issue last year, and I requested that we not do this roller coaster thing, especially where this year we're talking about a 5% increase and possibly, trying to offset with the fund balance, blah, blah, blah. The point to me of these kinds of funds is for consistent addition so that we can so that we can do things as needed. And I would once again request that we not do this roller coaster thing. I'm in favor of doing it. Absolutely, the money should go in, and if, I will vote for it. But I just would like to request that we be as consistent as possible. We don't have to put $150K in every year, but the up and down of it all, I think we really could do better if we would just be consistent with it. Thank you.
Dave Hemingway again, Webster. Oh, this one's really loud. So I want to start by saying I'm completely in favor of funds like this. They are amazing. We use a lot of them in our town. They help dramatically to this woman's point of being able to stabilize rates over time, even though your projects happen now in another 4 years, et cetera. That said, I do want to talk about one of the specifics of this warrant article. And that is that you are stating that it is coming from the unassigned fund, so there is no taxation. Being in a town, I understand that that is technically correct. However, you just finished stating earlier this evening that the unassigned fund is lower than it needs to be, too low in fact, and that is what we use to offset our taxes. So I would encourage you to not be using this as a from the unassigned fund and to treat it like what it really is, say that it is taxation and take it from part of the actual accounted budget and warrant article numbers. Thank you.
Anyone else? In that case, thank you all for your support and interest. We really do appreciate your feedback, and it does impact the budget and warrant that will be brought to the annual meeting. The school board will be reconvening their recessed January board meeting in a few minutes, right here. Please feel free to remain with us for that meeting. Did you want to say something? I'm sorry. I was late
Just quickly, so this is the packet, right, that was handed out today. Typically, I mean, aren't there usually like tax charts and estimates and other stuff presented here? Or will all that be available at the actual annual meeting? So I'm just curious where that is, because I thought it was usually here, but frankly, I've missed the last couple of these.
Yeah, we don't have a tax, as I mentioned earlier, a tax rate guess, because that's really what it was, with so many variables who were taking estimates. And I reached out to the Department of Ed and the folks there in DRA about, you know, and they said, well, yeah, it's an estimate and an estimate coming up with an, you know, and looking back at the percentages, some years it was fine, some years it was way off.
But it will be there at annual meeting in that packet? You'll have estimates then?
We weren't intending on having, because again, it's an estimate and an estimate to come up with an estimate. So looking at historical data, it wasn't, it's not like that's the number that you're going to see on your tax bill.
So that's a little bit of a deviation. I mean, it's always an estimate. You're always estimating, you know, what are property values going to be in the towns. It's more complicated in a cooperative. But, you know, the budget's up X amount, and estimating and portioning that back to the various communities based on current enrollment and so forth. I mean, we've always seen that, so that's why I thought it would be here. I can picture the chart in my head. I'm surprised to hear that that's something we won't do going forward. I'll pull last year's booklet. I don't remember if it was in there or not. But it just feels like historically that's information the taxpayers have been presented so that they can understand what that impact will be. So I would urge you to try that. You can put, you know, rough estimate on it. I don't care how you label it, but you should be able to make some predictions the best that you can. And I would just urge board members to try to encourage that gets out there, because again, you want to keep that support from the community, and being able to estimate and understand that, I think, would be important. So thank you.
Thank you. Is this the last chance to speak?
Yes.
I got kind of a non-budget thing. I just want to make a statement. So I would argue that the high school principal is the most challenging position in a school district. If it's not the first, it's a close second. And our high school principal in this district is not only taking on the responsibilities of being a principal, but he's also teaching math classes. And our son has him, loves him. I just think that's commendable, and I think it needs to be stated in public that, you know, Sam has taken on these added responsibilities and still doing the challenges of a high school principal. So I really appreciate it, and I thank him for that, and we're lucky that we have him doing that.
Indeed we are. Thank you. And I hear he sometimes drives a bus, too. Yeah. That said, we're going to reconvene our meeting in just a few moments, and you're welcome to stay. We'll do it right here. Thank you. The annual meeting is Friday, March 8th in the high school gym. The, oh.
Is this, oh, it's working now. Why is it in the gym? It's loud, it's hard to hear, and it's uncomfortable. We have this beautiful auditorium. Why are we sitting on bleachers in an acoustically crippled space?
There have been, for folks on your side, there's also folks on the other side, the streamlined voting, the handicap access for folks during that voting process has made all of that streamlined and much smoother. People can space apart if they want. There is, because we have more seating and more space, so that's been the decision.
I'm going to argue on the other side of that handicap access is that it is harder to see and it is harder to hear. I don't know what the answer is, but I would request that we try to do something, because, maybe do something with the sound system. I don't know what it is, but that space is atrocious for that meeting. My opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, good. We are reconvening the January meeting of the Merrimack Valley School Board. for the purpose of setting the warrant, right? But it's Article 3, which is the budget. Is there anyone on the board who wants to comment or say anything at all? Yes, thank you. Let's do it that way.
I would move that we approve Article 3 for the warrant to see if the school district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $48,298,106 for the support of schools, the salaries of school district officials and agents, and for the payment of statutory obligations of said district. This article does not include appropriations voted in other warrant articles.
Is there a second to that motion? Melissa seconded. Is there any discussion? Yes, here, take that.
I'm gonna go grab another mic. Here you go. So you guys can have one and we'll have one here. So, as people know on the Finance Committee, I was hesitant to bring this forward to the school board. And I know this makes it sound like, you know, there's a solution this year, because there's only 99.1% wiggle room. But looking forward, I think there's got to be, you know, a strategic plan or some sort of plan to bring this down, because I really feel that a 5.9% increase is going to really affect the taxpayers, and I'm a taxpayer. So I think that, you know, we have to really consider that this can't be exponential, you know, increase, that we've got to do something next year to really work on this problem pretty seriously. And I would request, when we do vote, to have a roll call vote, if that's possible. Take that down there. I got another one back here.
You get to hold it.
Anyone else? Yes.
I had a question in the budget itself about an ELA specialist. There was a salary for 1 year. This year there was not a salary, and then there's a salary for next year. I
ELO.
just want to understand that.
So the ELA position is about 5% grant funded, so it's really sort of the extra days. But previously, there wasn't a separate line for the ELA specialist, so that's why you would see nothing and then something. And we had the math specialist, you may notice, has been on there and has been consistent. The ELA position was new last year, but we didn't have it in a separate line,
So we have had one all along, though.
just in the last year.
Now, we've had a specialist all along.
No,
course
this was not an ELA specialist. We had a math specialist, a district math specialist for a number of years, somewhere around 10 years, but the ELA specialist just came about in last year.
Oh, I thought we had one in the past. Maybe we didn't in the past year, but
It was always brought up, but it was one of those cost-saving things that we, you know, tried to keeping costs down, but the need kept growing, and we felt that it was time to add that position.
I just want to say about having the estimated tax rates throughout the 90s. For a long time, we didn't do it because it was so unpredictable. It was such an estimate. And then we did start doing it, and I guess we're going back to not doing it. But we did not do it for a long time, then we did it for a long time.
Yeah, there were about 5 years that that was in place. I think 2018 to last year, 2023, those were in there. There's no requirement to do that, but so.
Anyone else?
I think I got it. Is there, I mean, why are we going to not doing it again? Because it does seem like taxpayers
would like to have that estimate, even though they recognize that it's an estimate. I know I personally like knowing that number. Like, it helps me wrap my head around the math to have that number, even if it's an estimate. So I'm just wondering what was the decision that made us decide not to include it?
If the board would like me to put something together, I'm happy to do so.
I would kind of like to
I
see that.
would
I think
too.
it would help us.
I think a lot of us would.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's important to, we can emphasize that it's an estimate, but I think it's important for us to continue with that piece, because that was something that I think helped taxpayers wrap their head around it a little bit.
I see a lot of shaking heads. Without taking a vote, we would like you to try to do that, please.
Consider it done.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to vote?
Actually, I kind of have addition to that. Would we be able to break out the tuition estimate on, oh my gosh, I have so many pages here, on the back, so that we could see kind of an estimate of which is the Learning Center and which is Andover for next year? Is that possible?
The Andover tuition represents $1,134,120 of that total amount.
Yes, but I'm hoping to kind of break it out for a little bit more of easier read for folks who haven't been attending these and maybe want a better idea. At annual meeting is what I was asking for.
There is going to be a chart.
Oh, good.
That there's going to be a spreadsheet, well, just the chart part of it, that's going to have the monthly charges for Andover, as I had promised that we do moving forward. And even though it's not a full year, you'll see the anticipated, so there will be that in the annual report. So it'll be a month-by-month breakdown, so you see how many total students, how many days, because that's how it's charged if we have a kid come in late. So that will be broken down.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Anybody else? Any other comments? Are you ready to vote? We have a request for a roll call vote, which is fine. We will do that. The motion before us is to recommend Article 3 as written. Roll call. Yes.
Yes.
He's not here. We will vote on finalizing the warrant at our February 6th, is it, meeting? So the rest of the articles will be finalized. We need to wait and see if there are any petitioned articles and so on. That said, there being no other business for the January meeting, we are adjourned. Thank you.